people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. The EBU bantamweight title fight between unbeaten up-and-comers Johanna Wan You, who I talked about here on the channel, and Italy's own Simone Salvatori. And the fight worked out exactly as I predicted, exactly as I expected. Simone Salvatori didn't have the tools to keep Johanna Wan You out. The accuracy, speed, timing, she may have had the edge in height and length, but she was lacking in a lot of other areas, and it's for that reason Johanna was able to consistently slip past the straight punches, get mid-range to inside, and bring over big looping rights.
Yeah.
I want to say that the effort was a little bit frenzied at first from Johanna Wan You. You could tell she wanted to make a statement, end the night early if she could. This fight taking place in Italy, Simone Salvatori's neck of the woods.
Johanna had the right idea.
Though as stated, the effort was a little bit frenzied at the start. After 3, you saw Johanna take a more measured approach, changing levels as she comes forward, staying elusive, waiting for opportunities to bring over the big overhand right. She tried for it several times.
Landed it several times.
Simone Salvatori, she's vulnerable mid-range to inside, keeps that chin in the air, doesn't protect it.
It's there to be hit.
Though I would have liked to see a little bit more body work from Johanna Wan You. It didn't take long for her to establish that looping right.
Conditioning her opponent.
I think if Johanna would have went to the body, that would have helped to open up Simone Salvatori a little bit more. You know, some right hands got in, a good number of them, but some didn't.
Some missed.
Johanna was a bit right hand happy, letting go of that shot many times throughout the course of a fight, and there were other shots, other opportunities there for her.
Not just the right hand.
Though still too fast, still too sharp for Simone Salvatori, slipping past the straight shots, getting mid-range to inside, and flustering the taller, longer fighter.
Johanna moving that head, angling that torso, taking a wide stance, changing levels as she comes forward, staying tricky, staying elusive, but staying on top.
On top of Simone Salvatori, who had no answers for Johanna Wan You's aggression.
She really picked it up in round 7.
Showed even more accuracy and more power towards the tail end of the match, getting off big punches, clean ones.
I think the pace of the match finally started to get to Simone Salvatori, making her that much more hittable.
In tandem with Johanna throwing punches in bunches, she wasn't throwing singles, not just.
Try for the right, bring over the left.
Effectively flustering Simone Salvatori with activity.
Simone was never in this fight.
She showed a good chin, but not much in terms of ability. She was completely outmatched.
Johanna Wan You, only 22 years old in today's 118-pound division, shows a high ceiling.
Perfect marriage of ability, sheer ability, and applied sciences. And what is the sweet science? I would like to see Johanna exhibit a little bit more poise moving forward, though she's only 22 years old.
Almost immediately in this fight, you saw that Johanna understands her range a lot better than Simone did.
Johanna packed enough punch, enough power, that if she would have been just a smidge more accurate, she could have got Simone Salvatori out of there. The frenzied approach.
She was really right-hand happy in this fight.
She definitely won it. I said she'd win it.
I did.
Simone was there to be hit, though I think that if Johanna would have measured her approach just a smidge more, she could have stopped Simone Salvatori, as she landed the right hand several times, not always cleanly.
Setting her up for other punches would have opened her up even more for those looping right hands.
So I don't want to nitpick. It was a dominant showing for young Johanna Wan You, who's only 22 years old. Plenty of time to continue to work on her ring craft. And if this is what she's looking like now, imagine 2 fights, 3 fights, 4 fights from now.
Advancing to a professional record of 9 wins, no losses, no draws, with 2 knockouts.
She had a very busy 2022. Busy last year, having fought 4 times. This fight with Simone Salvatori, this was her second fight of this year, leaving plenty of time for Johanna Wan You to squeeze in 1, 2 more fights this year.
Second fight of this year, and her second victory over an unbeaten fighter. Unbeaten Wendell Cruz, unbeaten Simone Salvatori yesterday.
Johanna's the real thing.
And didn't Johanna I believe what we're looking at is the future of the women's bantamweight and super bantamweight divisions. Currently, there are 4 reigning champions at bantamweight. Ebony Bridges of Australia holding the IBF, Yuli Hangluna of Mexico holding the WBC, Dina Thorsland of Denmark holding the WBO, and Nina Hughes of the United Kingdom holding the WBA.
On this kind of schedule, Johanna may end up being ready to fight for a title as soon as early next year. Because she's young, there's no need to rush into anything.
I'd like to see her fight 2 more times this year.
Maybe build up Johanna to a fight with a former champion like Jamie Mitchell, who has since rebounded off the loss to Nina Hughes.
Not straight away, after 1 or 2 more fights.
As stated, Johanna's young, and there's no need to rush her into anything. She's got enough time and enough ability that you can build her up gradually.
So that by the time she is fighting for a title, she's more than ready to win it and more than ready to defend it. Congratulations to her for her latest victory.
I see a future champion in Johanna Wan You, a kid that could go all the way. And super middleweight news ahead of tonight's big fight. John Ryder on Canelo Alvarez, he says, it could have happened after Callum Smith. I look at it as a blessing. It didn't.
John Ryder's optimism is very refreshing, albeit not very convincing.
I don't think this is going to end well for John. John himself says, I think for myself, the best time is now. Ryder told BoxingScene.com and select other outlets during a Wow Hydrate hosted media roundtable. It could have happened after the Callum Smith fight, maybe sometime in 2020. I look at it as a blessing that it didn't. I've worked hard, applied tunnel vision that I have now. I am about to take him on, and it's a chance I relish. Ryder challenges Guadalajara's Alvarez, who defends his undisputed super middleweight championship atop a DAZN pay-per-view event just outside his hometown.
Now, some are complaining that this shouldn't be a pay-per-view and that the people at DAZN, they're a bunch of hypocrites because initially, when they started out, they said that pay-per-view was dead.
Now, they're billing pay-per-views of their own, though nowhere near as frequently as the people over there at the PBC. I mean, when I hear these criticisms, what I think to myself is, you could say the same thing about Al Heyman.
You could say the exact same thing about the PBC. Who remembers free boxing for all? Hashtag free boxing for all.
Now they're billing more pay-per-views than anybody and everybody, DAZN included.
You're telling me that Canelo versus Ryder, that's not box office, that's not pay-per-view worthy.
But Gervonta Davis versus Isaac Cruz was. Gervonta Davis versus Hector Luis Garcia. Ruiz versus Areola. Ruiz versus Ortiz. Ortiz versus Charles Martin.
That was box office.
Keith Thurman versus Mario Barrios. That was pay-per-view worthy.
Is that what you're telling me? You're telling me that tonight's undisputed super middleweight title fight with the biggest draw in this country, that's not box office, that's not pay-per-view worthy, but those fights were?
I'm often accused of repeating myself here on the channel, but oftentimes I have to, because if I don't,
stuff like that gets overlooked. Stuff like that flies under the radar. It's not like DAZN has 3 and 4 and 5 fighters they're billing as box office fighters.
They're not sticking 5 and 6 and 7 guys on pay-per-view the same way the PBC is. So before you go harping to me about DAZN and how they're hypocrites,
take a look in the mirror.
Don't come to me talking about how the people at DAZN are hypocrites while you're pulling punches on the PBC.
Free boxing for all.
John Ryder, ahead of tonight's fight. John Ryder continued, if I say I'm supremely confident, people will say I'm delusional, admitted Ryder. But I wouldn't be going out there and taking the team with me that I am, if I didn't believe.
Well, listen, even if I don't like John Ryder's chances tonight, I never saw anybody get anything done. Anything that was difficult by telling themselves they couldn't do it.
These difficult situations, these big moments, you have to believe, even if nobody else does. And John, the upset-minded southpaw from Islington,
he believes.
He has to, even if me and you don't.
Pointing out that Canelo Alvarez has lots of mileage, hard fights, and is not getting any younger. We don't know what he has left.
Based on the comprehensive loss that he suffered last year to Dimitri Bivol and the lackluster showing, the lack of explosivity that we saw in his last fight opposite the ring, his old buddy Gennady Golovkin, there are a lot of people that feel Father Time is finally catching up to Canelo Alvarez.
That's how John feels.
It wasn't my time when I lost to Callum Smith, but now I plan on making Alvarez's belts my belts, Ryder told Marcos Villegas in an interview with Fight Hub TV. I'm really happy about that. It's not been gifted to me. I've had to work hard for it, time and time again. So now I feel like it's my time. The timing is right. I wouldn't say I lost hope, but the path was often cloudy and foggy, and at times I was walking with no destination in mind, just one step in front of the other. I kept faith, and here we are.
John has earned his keep. He's earned his way, and Canelo Alvarez's critics and boo-birds, they can't see that.
Or they don't want to. He lost the controversial decision to Callum Smith. A lot of people feel that he won that fight. He upset the apple cart for former champion Daniel Jacobs.
He upset the apple cart for then unbeaten Zach Parker on the Queensberry promotion side of things.
So some would have you believe that because John Ryder is from the United Kingdom, because he's a British fighter, that somehow makes him less of a fighter than some American-born fighters. American-born fighters that aren't doing and haven't been doing very much.
Those who would belittle and berate Canelo Alvarez's undisputed run on the premise that 2 of the 3 champions he took on were from the UK.
They say those guys weren't very good, but in saying that, that's an indictment on these American-born fighters they like to prop up. I mean, if it's so easy, then why didn't David Benavidez do it? He's been campaigning as a super middleweight for eons.
He's been campaigning as a super middleweight since before Canelo started his undisputed run.
Relevant questions like that are often met with excuses and sob stories.
It's so fucking easy to go undisputed at super middleweight. Why didn't David do it?
Cue the violins.
And the lame excuses.
John Ryder continued. We're similar height and similar build, so I think it's going to blend for a great fight. A lot of people are commenting on how much alike we are. I just hope that it'll blend well for the fight, and it'll make for a great fight, said Ryder. I've watched every Canelo Alvarez fight since the late 2000s. If there's a Canelo fight, I tuned in. I've seen it, so it won't be hard for me to watch it again and study it now as an opponent. I've got a great trainer in Tony Sims, and he will be working hard to pick things out. And come May 6th, we'll have a great game plan.
John Ryder is a mid-range to inside pressure fighter, and pressure fighters really don't change much in between fights.
Irrespective of who they're facing, who their opponents are, pressure fighters don't change much in between fights because no matter what, whatever they want to do, whatever it is, they want to do it mid-range to inside.
And it involves applying pressure.
Let's be fair. Canelo has a lot of miles on the clock now. He's not getting any younger, and he's had a lot of hard fights. The year of 2021 really took its toll on Saul with the 3 fights in a year against Yildirim and Billy and Caleb. Obviously, he became undisputed, but who knows what toll that took on his body deep down, said Ryder. Obviously, last year wasn't great with the Bivol defeat, and the fight against Golovkin wasn't a vintage performance, but he got the win, and obviously surgery. So he's coming back. We don't know what Saul has left, but we've got to treat him like he's the best Canelo that he's ever been.
Sound logic.
So irrespective of optimism and sound logic, I don't think things are going to end well for John Ryder later on today because he's a mid-range to inside pressure guy and Canelo's a counterpuncher, a world-class counterpuncher, a proven counterpuncher. And the more aggression John uses against him, the more I think it's going to backfire. I think John is going to get stopped.
You might be thinking to yourself, well, Canelo didn't stop a 40-year-old Gennady Golovkin.
And I admit, I expected that Canelo would stop him as well, and he didn't, though. You tell me, who has?
Many times has Gennady Golovkin been stopped? How many times has he even been dropped? Hell, how many times has he even been hurt?
That Canelo Alvarez didn't stop Gennady Golovkin, it's not as big an indictment as some make it out to be because Gennady, he's never been stopped. He's never even been dropped.
Canelo not living up to that particular expectation doesn't mean he can't stop John Ryder. I think he can. I think he will.
He's gonna stop him. Eddie Hearn says, I've never seen John Ryder, weirdly, so confident going into a fight.
Well, John, in so many words, he feels he's catching Canelo at the most opportune time to catch Canelo, and there's reason to believe that.
John Ryder's not here to make up the numbers, Hearn said during an interview posted to Matchroom Boxing's YouTube channel on Tuesday. John Ryder's here to try and create and achieve one of the greatest upsets from a British fighter of all time. But I've never seen John, weirdly, so confident going into a fight, especially as difficult as this. He's had a great camp, he's in the shape of his life, his confidence is at an all-time high, he feels, and I think he's right, this is the best time to fight Canelo. He's coming off his operation, coming off a couple of okay performances last year, and John's confident. But he's got it all to do, especially against that crowd.
John Ryder is optimistic, refreshingly optimistic ahead of this thing. He's beaming. But if nothing else, John knows that win or lose, he's about to make a career-high purse, a career-high payday, boxing in a very big fight.
A fight where he has nothing to lose and everything to gain. So at least in part, some of what you're seeing from John,
It's knowing that there's no pressure on him, and all the pressure is on Canelo.
pressure to stay a champion, pressure to win, and not just win in good fashion, pressure to perform.
That's on Canelo.
You know, you can't afford to have close rounds against Canelo Alvarez in Guadalajara, Hearn said. You're coming into his backyard, you know, the king of boxing, the undisputed champion, to rip the belts from him. And I expect John to fight aggressively in this fight. That's why I honestly think it's going to be a great fight, because I don't think John is just going to coast through rounds, losing rounds. He's going to have to get up close. He's going to have to get in his chest. He's going to have to get on the inside. And that's all the things that's going to make Canelo Alvarez fight. And I think the styles will blend well, and I think it'll be a great fight.
An action fight. I'm anticipating an action fight because John Ryder, he's an action fighter.
He would easily be the best name on a Caleb Plant's resume, a David Benavidez, a Demetrius Andrade, or a Jermall Charlo's resume. He would be.
But this is Canelo Alvarez we're talking about. A far more accomplished fighter, a more proven fighter than any of those guys.
I expect some feel-out rounds at the start, maybe one or two. I don't think John is going to come out guns blazing at the opening bell.
At the start.
It'll be a round or two before things pick up, though it's just like Eddie Hearn said. John Ryder can't hope to win a points decision in Guadalajara, in Canelo Alvarez's neck of the woods. So it's got to be his mission to overwork and overwhelm Canelo Alvarez. Easier said than done, I know, but that's the reality of things.
That's what he has to do.
A crafty and durable southpaw who's stubborn. John Ryder is no mug.
And I think it'll take John a round or two before he's comfortable enough to really put the squeeze on Canelo and apply pressure. In turn, I think Canelo at the start, because John is a southpaw.
He's not in unfamiliar territory with a southpaw. He faced one in Billy Joe Saunders and another some years before that in Erislandy Lara. Though those southpaws, those were pure boxers, not pressure fighters.
Billy Joe Saunders, Erislandy Lara, Austin Trout.
Not all southpaws are created equal, and the difference between John and those fighters are fighters that like to hit and run, box and punch.
Those are long-range guys. John Ryder is a mid-range guy. Mid-range to inside.
So where Canelo has to work to catch up to and cut off the ring on fighters like that, with John, he ain't got to worry about having to find John.
He doesn't have to worry about putting the pressure on John the way he'd have to put the pressure on them.
John's going to be there, a little taller than Canelo Alvarez, little bigger.
Once again, Canelo's not in unfamiliar territory. He's fought bigger guys than John.
And I'd say Canelo Alvarez stops this guy at or around the midway point.
I anticipate Canelo's counter uppercut is going to be a particularly important punch.
I think he's going to stop him.